about 1 hour 40 minutes or so. Okay, so we begin with the Daily Nation. Stolen dream, corruption, the noble vision of the framers of the Constitution to decentralize services to the people has been marred by instances of devolved graft, with billions of shillings that were intended for development having been diverted to line the pockets of county officials and well-connected individuals. You will recall the speech that was given by President William Ruto at the official opening of the devolution conference last week. I also see at the let's take a look at a bit more detail here. And amount of money released to counties since 2013, and I did these figures for NTV. You can find that on our NTV Kenya YouTube channel, is 2.98 trillion shillings. And the figure includes the equitable share from the national government and grants from both the government and development partners. Amount spent by counties since 2013 for both recurrent and development expenditure. Of this, 1.21 trillion shillings has been spent on personal emoluments such as salaries, wages and allowances. And amount generated by counties as their own source revenue. Most of the counties have failed to achieve their revenue targets every year. And so in the last decade of devolution, they've raised about 306.6 billion shillings. So that is to do with devolution at 10. At the very top here, Ruto moves to counter Raila influence in Gusii region. Banks reject increase of cash deals to 2 million shillings. Lenders say this will increase avenues of corruption. And some good news captured on the front page here. Simiu shines. Kenya's Daniel Simiu Ebenyo celebrates after clinching second position in the men's 10,000 meters final during the World Athletics Championships at the National Athletics Center in Budapest yesterday. Simiu bagged Kenya's first medal at the championships after finishing second in the race won by Uganda's Joshua Cheptegei. I see also highlighted on the front page below that, security, Interpol deals blow to cyber criminals. An Interpol-led cybersecurity operation, which was launched in April, successfully dismantled 615 malware hosts that were targeting Kenyan websites. Golden Jubilee, KCC gets facelift after 5 decades, and opinion, corruption killing dreams and hopes. The saga surrounding the overseas education airlift funds in Uasin Gishu depicts a country that has hit rock bottom and is morally bankrupt, argues Kaltum Guyo. Okay, so that is the front page of the Daily Nation. Prof. XN Iraki. When I was looking at these numbers on devolution at 10 and the fact that about 2.98 trillion has gone to the counties in terms of grants and also equitable share in the last 10 years. And I was like, that's the amount of money we're looking to raise in this financial year. I don't know, the figure for me just seems small.
This looks small, but it's big because it's accumulated over 10 years. So you can divide by 10 to find out how much money goes there every year. So it's quite a lot of money, considering that money was not going there before. But now the Constitution demands they must get that money every year, irrespective. And I think the big debate we should be having is whether that money was put into the right use. And the story seems to suggest no. But what I'm interested in is the figures in the headline there, 306.6 billion. That we are giving counties money, but not generating their own. And I think that was the soft underbelly of devolution. That people saw the national government as a father or a mother. Give us the money. Our work is to get it. So I think it's a time when we go to the next 10 years of devolution that the counties start generating their own resources, their own money. So it is not just a question of being given money, but you also give back. When you have a son or a daughter and he grows old enough, he reaches a stage where he can also contribute to the family budget.
Yeah, and I'm not disputing that, but ideally, my understanding of the way things were set up was the bigger chunk of the monies would come from the equitable share, because it is the national government that has the capacity, given the Kenya Revenue Authority, to generate such revenue.
But that does not stop counties from generating money. They can also generate their own money.
And I'm not disputing that.
In fact, the original dream of devolution was not about counties. It was about making counties the centers of economic growth, not the centers of receiving money from the national government. That's what I'm saying.
All right. What your thoughts, Abraham? I'm trying to compare the amount we're looking to raise in this financial year, the revenue, and then I'm looking at over 10 years. This is the same amount that has gone to the counties. Is it just in my mind that I find the figures disproportionate?
It's interesting that you say that, but I think we need to put into context that one, devolution, first of all, is not about the creation of counties. It's a distribution of powers to provide services and economic centers, as Prof says. And therefore, sometimes when we talk about devolution and counties, we overly focus just on counties. We forget that 2.9 trillion is just about 12% of the amount of money that has been spent in the entire time across the country. About 85% still is being spent at the national level by the government. And if you include the state corporations, and we'll talk more about that later, there's quite some amount that is still being spent by the national government. Two, Article 209 did not devolve the major taxes to counties. So I think it's important for us to appreciate that. VAT is collected by the national government. A national government here is acting as an agent of the national system, if I was to talk like that. So that KRA, let me explain. You see, national government has a dual role. It has, first of all, a role of performing the functions assigned under Schedule 14 to the national government. But it also has the role of ensuring that, for instance, finances are collected across the country and then are distributed. So those are like dual roles, if you think about it. And that's why a lot of powers then were moved to the National Assembly to be like a neutral arbiter, because it has representatives across board. So when you look at the major taxes, VAT, value-added tax, income tax, import duty, and excise duty, it's all collected by the national government, not for the national government, but on behalf of the entire national, because that's what then becomes the equitable share. That's what gets distributed. So 2.9 trillion looks an amazingly big figure, but when you think about it, this year alone is 385 billion. 385 billion, actually, sorry, 370 billion. If you compare 370 billion against a budget of 3.7 trillion, it's just about 10%, if you think about it, if you work it out like that. Of course, the Constitution requires that at least 15% should go. There's a lot of math which we may not be able to go into this. So what I think is that, one, yes, quite a lot of money has gone to counties in the aggregate of it. The big question, which was the big, should have taken a bit more energy in the co-devolution conference, perhaps didn't do as much, is, has this money gone into the services that are required to be provided by the county governments? But on the reverse, has the national government also honored its end of the devolution? Because devolution is not just the creation of counties. It's actually the distribution of powers. That's why Schedule 14 exists. If it was just about counties, there will be no Schedule 14. It will be what you had initially with the local authorities, where basically you had just the local authority transfer fund, where you transfer money for local authorities to do certain things. So let's see the figure in as a quantum of the total amount that is being spent countrywide, so that then we are able to see that significantly we still have a lot of money being spent. And you remember there's a report that the Intergovernmental Technical Relations Committee released, I think, 2 weeks ago, that suggested that about 272 billion is still being spent at the national level that should actually be spent at the county level. So there's an accountability question, which is critical. But on the other hand, there's also a question of are all the functions and the finances that are required actually going to the counties? Yeah.
All right. I saw another story on the front page here of the Daily Nation that could fall under your areas of expertise. Banks reject increase of cash deals to 2 million shillings. Let me just read out some details here. This report is by Edwin Mutai. Commercial banks have rejected, sorry, it's on page 21. Page 21, the business pages. Commercial banks have rejected a move by the cabinet to amend the law to increase cash transactions to over 2 million shillings, warning the window will increase avenues for money laundering and terrorism financing. The Kenya Bankers Association told Parliament that the increase of international threshold of 10,000 US dollars, 1.41 million shillings, to 15,000, which is about 2.12 million shillings, puts Kenya on the edge, given its geopolitical location in the Horn of Africa. And a quote here, retain the cash limits at 10,000 US dollars or equivalent in other currencies, as opposed to the 15,000 US dollars or equivalent in other currencies. Mr. David Nyamato, chairperson of KBA Compliance Committee and head governance, regulatory affairs and stakeholder relations at NCBA Bank Kenya told MPs. And due to the increase in the volatility of the exchange rate, as well as runaway inflation rates being experienced, the threshold of 10,000 US dollars threshold amount should be retained and applied in a risk-based approach. Curious what you make of this, Prof. I'll start with you, Prof. XN Iraki, because this morning I have two professors. We've been joined by Professor Elizabeth Kalunda. I did give your credentials earlier, but she is Associate Professor, USIU Africa, as well as Chair Department of its Accounting, Finance, and I keep forgetting the third one, Economics, Chandaria. So, yeah, so first, Prof.
I think before I respond to your question, let me declare this panel constitutionally constituted.
Finally.
No more than 2/3 of the same gender. Okay, I hear you, I hear you. What do you make of this? Banks reject increase of cash deals to 2 million shillings. Okay, I'm seeing they've raised some concern about the geopolitics, right? Security concerns, but also they've talked about here increase in volatility of the exchange rate as well as runaway inflation rates. What does that have to do with it?
See, this is an interesting question, because when I talk to the businessmen on the streets, they say the former limit, I think it was $10,000, was too little. So if you are going to be doing transaction with money, and every money you take to the bank you have to explain, what people have been doing is you break that money into smaller chunks because you not ask questions. But that slows down your transactions. But the banker are saying this is a security risk, because a lot of money will be coming to the system that cannot be explained. So they probably think people will be cleaning their money. And when you have money into the economy that is not explained, then you have inflation coming up. So that is their concern. So I think from good people, it's a good move, because transaction will be faster. But from the bad people, they are going to benefit, because they can now clean the money and bring money to the system from wherever source it is coming from, and that will have inflationary pressures. So I think what the banks need to do is just to be able to be prudent, that even if I bring 50,000 and I can comfortably explain where it is coming from, I should be allowed to transact in it. Because now people are saying, I have the money, but I cannot transact. One of the things that we forget is, despite M-Pesa and so on, maybe 95% of the transactions are cash-based. We are still not a cashless society. But I also ask from a personal point of view, if I have this amount of money, why do I want to transact cash? If I have 3, 4, 5, 10 million, I should do it online. And that's what we do all the time. When you're buying land and so on, we do it online. So from a security point of view, it makes sense. Because why are you carrying so much money when it could be electronic?
Yeah.
But let's balance between the two.
Okay. All right. I also see here
I don't have such amount of money. I'm just observing.
Okay. I see a big figure also on the business page here. 10.5% basic lending rate, up from 9.5%. And on the briefs, there's a story that has we've covered pretty much the whole week. Anti-laundering talks dominate lawyers' event. Talks on anti-money laundering took center stage at the Law Society of Kenya's annual forum, which ended at the weekend in Diani, Kwale County. LSK President Eric Theory had to reassure the more than 1,400 lawyers that they would not be forced to report clients they suspect of involvement in suspicious financial transactions to the Financial Reporting Center, FRC. Instead, Mr. Theory said the LSK would be designated as a self-regulatory authority. So that is the Business Daily. Let's take a look at, sorry, that is the Daily Nation. Let's take a look at the Business Daily. Here we go. State to step back from Gulf fuel import scheme. And this is something we'll be touching on, because where the dollar is concerned, there is a question I had posed to my panelists. And this deal was meant to help with the dollar exchange rate. but it's hit 150. According to reports, I am no expert. But yes, according to reports, and they're credible because this is the Business Daily. But state to step back from Gulf fuel import scheme. This particular report by Dominic Omondi. IMF fears deal exposes taxpayers to currency risk. Obligation estimated at $4 billion US, which is about 572 billion Kenya shillings by September. An image of the Treasury CS Njuguna Ndongo at the launch of the budget preparation process for the 2024-2025 financial year last Friday. Kenya will take a step back from the government-backed fuel import credit scheme negotiated with Gulf nations after the IMF expressed concerns that taxpayers might be exposed to currency-related costs. Treasury Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Ndongo said the government would step back to allow private sector players, including oil marketing companies, banks and credit insurance providers to run the scheme. Professor Ndongo, however, said the government had explained to the IMF, who visited the country for reviews of credit and funding facilities, that the scheme was a trade finance arrangement which had no risks to the Kenyan government. Quote here, there is no end game to this review because what we will do is that the government will step back and allow market to work on its own with those deferred LCs, letters of credit. I'm curious what you make of this, Abraham, because this was meant to cure a shortage of dollars in the market. But then I see here that they're telling us that IMF expressed concerns that taxpayers might be exposed to currency-related costs. Perhaps you could explain to us what this is about?
Yeah, no, my read is that first of all, the government did what I consider a rash move because the problem being solved was not necessarily, the problem. Because the problem that was there right at that particular point is that we had a shortage of dollar. Mm-hmm. But then the problem you try to solve is by moving repayments to a future date and arguing in Kenyan shillings. Yet the base rate, the base negotiation currency is still dollar. Mm-hmm. It's only that now you're saying it's a government to government. So basically, by pushing it by 6 months, that's 6 months is a very long time. It's very difficult to predict what will happen in 6 months. Perhaps if you had said about 2 months. Secondly, fuel is not a commodity that comes and stays in a certain place, positioned, rather as stored for a later date use. Fuel is a good that is being moved every day. Mm-hmm. So why not pay as you sell? So this moving, and then pushing, basically it's like pushing the can down. Mm. So then finally, you are faced with a credit at a time when you don't have the currency. Mm-hmm. For me, I think that's the big challenge. Perhaps the intention was to try and see whether you can stabilize. But 6 months was already a very huge stretch, to predict what might happen. And the fact that, you see, that does not necessarily solve the availability of dollars in the market as it was. So what finally has ended up happening is that by the time now we are being faced now with the payments, because now we need to pay. September is coming. This was in March. So our 6 months have run out. We don't have money because with the money you're collecting, perhaps you're spending it for other things. Mm-hmm. So finally, it's basically like a deferred debt.
It's time to pay the piper.
Yeah.
All right, Professor Kalunda, are these concerns reported having been expressed by the IMF? Do you consider them valid? This concern that taxpayers might be exposed to currency-related costs.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Oli, for that. Yeah, so I agree with the IMF in terms of the cost of the fuel at that point. And I probably what the government was trying to do in this deal was to hedge, where you try to predict a future price now and probably a lower one. But it seems that the fuel prices, the global prices have gone down in a way, so we end up paying more than what actually is the current or prevailing market rate. So this was a move by the government to try to do the hedging, but apparently our forecasts were probably not the very accurate ones. Yeah.
So it was a gamble.
Yeah, it's okay, but from a finance part, it's actually, it's not really a gamble per se, but from the finance side, hedging is a skill that is used for risk management. But you have to be so good to predict so that you are assuming the prices will be high, so you fix the price now at a lower value. Yeah, but apparently that didn't seem to be what's working. And that's why even right now, as much as the fuel prices have gone slightly down globally, we are still paying the same pump prices. Yeah.
All right. Karibu Wangare Mwikia. She is a public finance management specialist, EGCL. Karibu sana? Or did I mix the G and the C? Did I get it right? One second. EGCL. Yeah, I got it right. Your thoughts on this state to step back from Gulf fuel import scheme?
I mean, you know, we have been having a lot of challenges when it comes to the exchange rate and fluctuations in the exchange rate. So I do concur that there are challenges to iron out. I don't think anybody could have predicted that the currency has done what it has done. And so I think there is space to step back and think about what the consequences may be, and to look towards how we can stabilize the dollar so that we can essentially stabilize the scheme that we have entered into.
All right. Prof?
There's an interesting debate, and welcome Wangari and her sister. At least now we
have surpassed.
Yes, I can see some stability. But if you remember when this deal came, we raised the issues. And one of the issues we raised was, can you put this deal on the table, we see the content. Today, if I asked you what was the content of this deal between the Kenyan government and the Gulf, we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But to add what you're saying, if you approach the date at which you're supposed to pay for this deal, this oil, that means there will be demand for dollars. And no wonder the dollar is keeping on, because the shilling is keeping on depreciating, because you have to convert the shillings into dollars. So what we need to do is not postpone problems. Let's confront them head on. Because no matter how long you wait, a day will come when you have to pay for it.
Okay.
But I think the most important thing I want to see is that deal. So that this panel and other people elsewhere can scrutinize it. Because if it was publicized, we would have said, this is good, this is bad, this is what to improve. But now we don't know the content. But the economic trends are telling us it was probably not as good as it was sold.
Okay. All right. I remember the EPRA DG took some questions as part of a virtual forum hosted by the Institute of Economic Affairs. Perhaps he divulged the bit more detail. Did you listen in, Abraham?
I think the big challenge, which I think we'll discuss here a bit more, is that we are getting less and less information about public engagements, public commitments that are made. I mean, these kind of contractual agreements are very critical, because right now what's basically happening is government saying, now we tried, we are unable. So basically pushing citizens back to private sector. Private sector has to make a profit. Two, they are the same people who have been providing this fuel, because at the pump you buy from a private sector, but the deal is government to government. I think moving forward, one of the big asks even to the Kenya Kwanza government is a bit more information about the kind of commitments that are being made, because that's what can tell us. And Kenyans are willing to even give thoughts and opinions about some of these agreements. It's not the first time that we are engaged in this kind of... a DG taking questions does not divulge information. What we need is that there's a document that was signed. You know, there is contractual agreements that were made. What do they entail? What kind of exposure? But secondly, I don't think in this day and age, Kenya needs to rely on IMF to be the one guiding our policies. I'm getting very concerned. You know, when IMF comes in, we change tack. You know, really, we are a sovereign nation. You know, and I perhaps I expect a bit more. Thank you.
You expect a bit more. All right, so we need to take a break, but we'll come back with what essentially some of these stories inform what we're discussing already. Yeah, because I see here inflation slows down, VAT growth to soften pace in a decade, and other stories. So we come back with all of this analysis on the other side of this break.
Good morning.
How are you?
With Glovo unaweza order chochote na ukipata una celebrate na body yako yote. Because your tasty grilled chicken ikifika.
Daring Abroad makes me dare. It's the only show of its kind in the world. And now it's bigger
and even more entertaining and informative than before.
Hapa kunaitwa Wakoe na inatubaba sana.
From London to Jersey Island.
Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo to the scenic features of Uganda, the Pearl of Africa.
And many more places abroad and at home.
I watch Daring Abroad. I like the stories which people bring.
Daring Abroad every Saturday at 7:30 p.m. with repeats every Sunday at 1:30 p.m. on NTV.
Mama Stevo, where are the kids?
I think they're upstairs doing their revision.
Oh, you guys are here. Maria and Steve, which revision papers are you doing today?
Baba, mimi nashughulikia maswali ya marudio ya somo la Kiswahili kutoka kwa gazeti la Taifa Leo.
Na wewe?
I am working on the mathematics revision paper from the Junior Sport magazine of the Daily Nation.
Wow, this is wonderful. Are the revision papers from Taifa Leo and Daily Nation working for you guys?
Yes, Dad. Wanauliza maswali yao kwa njia nzuri na nyepesi sana.
And the questions are in tandem with our syllabus.
Dear parents, invest in Taifa Leo and Junior Sport for KCPE and KCSE revision papers. Kwa maswali ya gazeti la Taifa Leo, usiukose uhondo huo kila Jumatatu hadi Jumamosi. In our Junior Sport, it's every Monday. Do not miss out.
With Glovo unaweza order chochote na ukipata una celebrate na body yako yote. Because your tasty grilled chicken ikifika, weekend inaanza. Ingredients are your favorite recipe just in time. Na wakati keki inafika ndio sherehe inaanza. Because to get anything on Glovo deserves a dance. Download the app, order anything unataka na we track minute by minute mpaka ikufikie. Glovo, order anything, we deliver in minutes.
Sorry.
Just ensure that Musa dies.
Nini? Donga amepasua mtu.
Zi. Nenda kuona padre. Padre yako Kenya.
Staki ngoma. Kazi kwa na ngori.
Is this where you're throwing money down the drain?
How? On this cleaning product? Impossible!
Harpic 10X. While other cleaners flow away, Harpic 10X's viscous formula in only one round of application gives you sparkling, clean toilet.
Harpic, 10 times better cleaning than other cleaning products.
And great savings too.
All right, welcome back to AM Live. We're looking at the state of the economy. Has it stabilized, as we've been told by the President, William Ruto? He's given, at least to my recollection, 2 grounds, and that is, I know you've talked about the role of IMF in our economic affairs, but he did say the IMF, World Bank, and even the U.S. ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman, recently he says, or rather, we had Meg in person, but he says the World Bank and IMF as well. Julian's has done several interviews as well. Julian Zambuko being our business editor, Nation Media Group. They have more or less tick our Finance Act, right, in an effort to regularize our taxes. Yeah, so he says on account of that and the fact that we're ahead of schedule to pay off the Eurobond, although he alluded to some intrigues where that is concerned, our economy is in a good place. But is that actually the situation ground? Before, let me just reintroduce my panelists if you're just joining us. And with me in studio this morning, we have Wangari Mwikia, Public Finance Management Specialist, Expertise Global. We also have Dr. Abraham Rugo, Country Manager, International Budget Partnership Kenya, Professor Elizabeth Kalunda, Associate Professor, USIU, and also Chair, Accounts, Finance and Economics Department, Chandaria School of Business. We also have in studio Professor Exen, Iraqi economist, lecturer, columnist. When does your column come out, Prof? Remind me.
Yesterday.
Sunday.
It's usually published in the Sunday Standard.
Yes, and Tuesdays.
And Tuesdays.
Yes.
Okay, so we look forward to that one. But before we took the break, Abraham was calling for greater transparency where some of these deals are concerned. I know a little bit later this morning, you will be moderating a panel on unpacking Kenya's debt problem, the impact of weak public oversight by Parliament. And I see you have a very good panel here. We have Honorable Kuria Kimani, Finance and Planning Committee, Director Parliamentary Budget Office, Dr. Martin Masinde, Fernandez Barasa, Governor, Kakamega County, and he's also the Chair Finance Committee, Council of Governors, and Honorable Nderitu Mureithi, Nerima Wako, Executive Director, Siasa Place, and James Muraguri, CEO, Institute for Public Finance. But let's finish up with the dailies. We were at Business Daily on the tick. I'll quickly go through now so that we can get into the conversation. I'm cutting it a bit close. Inflation slows down, VAT growth to softest pace in a decade. Kenya has reported the slowest growth in collections from value-added tax since it started enforcing IMF-led reforms a decade ago on the back of elevated inflation, which has squeezed salaries and curtailed new private sector investments. So I will star that on my hard copy here because I'll come back to it. Court freezes sugar traders' accounts on carrier tax claim. The High Court has frozen bank accounts belonging to 12 traders being pursued by KRA over alleged tax evasion after the disappearance of uncustomed sugar. Really? Are we still doing this? CBK rejects 33 billion shillings bond bids in rates standoff. Bond investors demanded more than 18% in interest in the auction for a reopened 5-year bond, whose sale closed last week, forcing the CBK to leave 33.9 billion shillings worth of bids on the table. So there we have it. That is the Business Daily. Let's take a look now at the Standard. Front page of the Standard here. They talk about rejected degrees. New generation of students have totally rejected certain courses offered in public and private universities, despite government classifying the programs as vital for Kenya's development. Let me just zoom in further because there's still room. There we go. 104 number of academic programs that attracted only 10 students each. 7 students who chose to study Bachelor of Science in Climate Change. 18 degree courses that attracted only 1 student each during the recent placement to universities. Let me see here. 20,151 Bachelor of Education Arts. Course that attracted the highest number of applicants is actually Bachelor of Education Arts. Prof, are you surprised at that?
No. I think this shows you the trend where we are going in terms of higher education. The students do their research before they enroll for degree programs. At the end of the day, what they want is a job. So if students feel they will not get a job after graduation, they will shun away from those particular degree programs. And that's why you can see Bachelor of Education, Science and Arts have the highest number of applicants, because apparently teaching is one of the areas where you are sure of getting a job. But students are being invited to go and take degrees that have no graduate in the market. So I don't want to go for a job interview and someone asks me, oh, you did a job, a BA in climatic change, what is that? So students nowadays have become very adept at getting information from local sources, from talking to their friends, from talking to their past alumni, and they know which side of their bread is buttered. So this actually to me shows that the market is working, the market for higher education. So you don't just go to do a degree because available. You have to look at the job prospects, and you have to look at where it is taking you. And I'm sure my sister Karuda can comment on that because she is in the higher education also.
Okay, do you have anything to add to that?
I have a comment around that. Now, looking at the courses that had only one applicant, you'll see that a number of these courses are in the agricultural space, which for me I find it's unfortunate, because Kenya is an agricultural country and we should enable our country to really be an agricultural country. But that now goes back to career guidance around our students and also the perceptions of our students around agriculture. So if we are shunning agriculture as a course, then that also brings a question on, are we able to really make Kenya an agricultural country? So career guidance will be important, and also probably a revision of those courses so that it gives value to the students, so that they don't feel they are doing a course that does not have a lot of maybe good view from the public.
All right. Yeah. So I will leave that there, but on the business pages, also highlighted on the front page of the Standard, strong dollar fuels diaspora remittances to record 104 billion. That on page 19 of the Standard. Let me just flip to it here. And they tell us, and just 2 pages short here. Okay, here we go. Wow, they are pull out, so I'm lost in between them. But let me just rely on my screen here. Kenyans working and living abroad sent home a record 104 billion shillings in the 60 days between June and July this year. New official data shows this has seen their families benefit from the strong dollar and strengthening of other major foreign currencies such as the British pound and euro. The shilling weakened by 19.5% in the year to July against the dollar and exchanged at an average of 144 shillings on Friday, according to the Central Bank of Kenya, a new record low. But several large banks are now selling the dollar at up to 150 shillings, with bankers and forex bureaus saying the higher prices have been driven by demand and the cost of accessing the hard currency. Okay, and the rush to take advantage of a strong dollar by Kenyans in the diaspora is therefore stretching and boosting the purchasing power of their local beneficiaries amid slump in the shilling, in turn triggering a remittance boom. Okay, and latest data from CBK shows remittances surged to 54 billion shillings last month alone, up from 49 billion shillings in June. Let's take a look at the Star, and I can only say shocking. Are education officials trading on girls' periods? Medics warn poor quality could cause infections, skin irritations, and worsen stigma. The details are this: audit reveals pads of poor quality and could easily fall off. A concern, major concern, especially because as the Nation Media Group, we undertook to end stigma and period poverty at an event. And yeah, so subject close to anybody. I mean, close to anybody's heart. Anybody who has a daughter, a mother, or a sister. Also on the front page here of the Star, wild animals are feasting bodies buried at Langata Cemetery. That is MPs being quoted there. Let me just flip to page 7 here and get a bit more detail on that. Page 7, this is 3, 4, 5 here. We should be about here. Let me see this one by Julius Otieno. Legislators claim thieves are also exhuming the dead, stealing coffins at the graveyard. Wild animals are mutilating human bodies buried in shallow graves at the filled-up Langata cemetery as thieves steal coffins, MPs have said. The lawmakers said the dead are not resting in peace as the animals are feasting on their bodies every night, thanks to City Hall and the Ministry of Health's inaction to relocate the site. We bury our dead in shallow graves and expose them to be mutilated by wild animals. Quoted here is Rangwe MP Lilian Gogo. The African culture is to the extent that it respects the dead. It is unfortunate that when we expect our dead to rest, they do not, and instead their bodies are mutilated by wild animals. Okay, I will leave that there. What else is on the front page here of the Star? Really quickly, I say I have about 3 minutes to be done with this. An image here, the editorial cartoon. Also on the front page of the Standard, Ruto sends mixed signals as bipartisan talks resume. And stories on the side here that we covered in our top stories. Okay, I will leave that there. Let's take a look finally at the People Daily. Hiring scams, KDF bosses put on the spot. Aiden Duale, CS Defense, quoted as saying, I asked this house to judge myself, General Ogola, and the entire leadership of KDF on this recruitment fraud. At least 25 officers on trial or under probe over jobs scandal ahead of next month's drive to hire soldiers. More on page 4 of the People Daily. Omanyala meets his match at World Event. TSC invites unions for talks on teachers' pay. And an image here of England's pain as they fall to Spain in World Cup final. Prof, you were asking me who I was supporting. And I told you, due to social media, I knew that England's team, at least I knew they're called the Lionesses. I should probably be more aware and more supportive of the sport, women's World Cup.
If they were called Lions.
So you were called Lions?
Yeah, they would have won.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's get into the topic of conversation. And this morning, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at the state of the economy, stabilizing the economy, debt, inflation, and the dollar.